Hi guys, wanted to do another quick video. This time I wanted to cover the Hunter Transit glitch for the PAL version of Jade Cocoon. There are two quick things I want to cover first before I get into the meat of it, which would be why the PAL version is largely not ran, and why the Hunter Transit glitch is difficult on PAL. So first, why people don't play the PAL version of the game, and that's quite simply just because the game is slower on PAL. Unlike the NTSC version, which you're running at about 60 FPS, the PAL version runs at 50 FPS, which causes you to have longer loading times, everything's a bit slower, and you tend to just lose a lot of time just as a consequence of playing on PAL. And this is true for a lot of PlayStation games. But generally speaking, in your any percent run, you're going to be about 3 minutes behind by the time you go into Barrier Gate at the start, and you're going to be about 8 minutes behind by the time you enter the Moth Forest. So unless a version-specific glitch is found to PAL, which makes the speedrun significantly faster, you're always going to get the fastest times on NTSC. And any new glitches that are found which aren't unique to PAL will, of course, also be faster to do on NTSC. And that's largely why you don't see people playing the PAL version of the game. It makes a lot of sense, to be fair. But that leads into why people find the Hunter Transit glitch difficult on PAL, in my opinion. And that is largely because there are so few people who are trying it, that people haven't really got it down. Right? I don't think it's actually that difficult. It is different to the NTSC Hunter Transit glitch, which I will go over soon, but by and large, I think it's just a matter of people not playing. So now I want to go over what the Hunter Transit glitch actually is before we go into the nitty-gritty of how you execute it. So, the Hunter Transit glitch, for those who aren't familiar, is a style of wrong walk glitch where we use the Hunter's Earring, that is this item over here, which would normally cause us to leave the forest, and you use this item when you are in a loading zone or next to a loading zone to move into the next screen of the forest, as it can only be used in the forest, and it will instead take you to a different room than intended. Rather than leaving the forest, you'll either end up in the next room, or in specific cases it moves you to completely different rooms that you shouldn't really be able to get to through them. And there are 6 of these wrong warps in the game. In descending order of difficulty, these wrong warps are the Dragonfly Forest 1, Dragonfly Forest 2, Spider Forest 1 and 2, Beetle Forest 1, and then Beetle Forest 2. Out of the 6, that's the ordering from hardest to easiest. Beetle Forest 2 is by far the easiest to do. So for this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to achieve this glitch in Dragonfly 1, as it's the hardest one to do, and therefore I feel the best one to demonstrate how you actually do the glitch. So here we are in Dragonfly 1. As you can see, we've got a turtle that's helpfully getting out of the way for us. And we want to perform the Hunter Transit glitch at the end of this room. So, one thing you can do in NTSC which you can't do in PAL is that you can stand next to a loading zone, like right next to it, get as close as you can, and then you can actually use the Hunter Transit glitch while stationary. This, however, will not work in the PAL version of the game. So if I edge up next to this loading zone, as close as I can get, I got a bit more space, about there, and then attempt to use the Hunter Transit glitch, this will not work. So while stationary setups can be used in the NTSC version, they cannot be used at all in PAL. In fact, PAL can only execute a wrong warp if you are in the loading zone when you attempt to use the Hunter's Earring. So let me show you what it looks like if you just run at this wrong warp and get it by just essentially timing it with Levant running forwards. That looks good. There we go. So that's what it would look like ideally if you had excellent timing and you could just do it first try optimally in a run. That's what it would look like, and that's what you'd want to be able to do. So obviously that's very difficult to do. You aren't using a consistent setup, you're just running at it, and you can try counting in your head, but that's rather imprecise, especially considering how small the window is. So how do you get into the loading zone in time, react in time, and start wrong warping? Well, there are 2 techniques I came up with, which can help you execute this. One is better than the other, I have to say. but is slower. It's more consistent, but it's slower. So let me quickly go over what those are. I'm going to reset this turtle really quickly, because it's now in our way. So, the two techniques I use is first looking for where Levant's shadow is the pixel position of its shadow. It's very hard to do in this particular wrong warp, just as a consequence of, again, it being very far away, which is why the second technique I'm going to go over is what I actually prefer to use here in my latest runs. It's still not perfect, but I find it more consistent. So you can sort of see here that Levant's shadow is sort of overlapping with this line here, of this sort of lighter blue and black dots that are in the corner here. And I sort of just want to get the shadow on top of that. And now I know I'm within, you know, a handful of steps from the boundary. I know I'm not going to be in it when I walk up to this point, but I know that I'm going to be next to it. So it's a good position to start running from. So I just I line up there, and I start running, and then I'm very likely to time that correctly. There we go. So I'll quickly show how that would look like in an actual run if you were to just run up to it, line up yourself with these 3 dots on the side, and then start running. Obviously, when you're in that menu, you'd want to equip your earring, but I've already done that in advance that you'd get from the silver crown. We've already done that, so there you go. That's how it would look like in an actual run. So now I want to go over the other technique I came up with, which uses a thing called staggering. So I'm going to need the use of visual aid for this, but essentially what this is how you can get Levant to be in motion, go into the menu, leave and re-enter the menu, and then Levant will be in a different position. So we're going to use a separate save state for this, actually. Let's just grab a good one. Overwrite. Let's go with this one. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. So what we're going to do is I'm going to move Levant, I'm going to go into the menu, and then I'm going to leave the menu. And I'm going to show you in overlaid images the position of where Levant was when we went into that menu, and the position of Levant where we left that menu. So let's do that now. And you may need to look quite closely here, but you can see Levant actually moved a tiny bit forward. And this is where staggering comes into it. So now I want to show you how this would actually look in a run in application. So I'm going to run up to the loading zone. I'm going to get closer than I did before. I've got a bit more space. I'm pretty good at judging this these days. So I'm going to take a step forward. I'm going to pause the menu and I'm going to save the state. I'm then going to show you that if I just try to do the 100 transit glitch in the current position, I'm going to miss. I will then reload that state, I will stagger, and then I will do the same thing, and then it will succeed. So let's do that now. So let's save that state that we just got, and now I'm going to miss the Hunter transit glitch. There we go, music's changed, we have missed. So let's go back into our menu. So this time we're going to leave and re-enter the menu. And I'm going to mash circle as soon as I press triangle to try and get back in the menu. There we go. So we stagger forward, and now I will attempt to Hunter transit glitch. And all that happened is I left and re-entered the menu. But that moved us far enough forward that we actually succeed the wrong warp instead of missing. And that's a lot more consistent. So I've gone back into the menu just before we did our last wrong warp. This is before we did any staggers. I'm going to show you that if I leave the menu, I'm going to transition to the next screen, even though if I use the Hunter's Earring, I miss. And I think this is what causes people to be confused as to the consistency of the Hunter transit glitch on the PAL version. So I leave the menu, I transition to the next screen, I don't see that I moved forward at all, but I did. I actually moved forward a fair bit. And that, I think, is the cause of the NTSC confusion. So that's all there is to it, really, is those two techniques. So I normally, in an actual run, and would recommend this to other players who are trying to use the PAL version, is to run up to this spot, attempt to run forward, and then if it doesn't look right, and it doesn't look like you got necessarily far enough, would be to actually leave the menu, So like in that position, I didn't move. But I know if I leave the menu, I'm now going to move forward. And they're going to be closer to the warp zone. And now I don't really know. So now I would start trying to stagger instead, where I'm just doing little movements. I'm going to go in and out of the menu. I actually think we moved enough far forward that we aren't going to get any stagger. Yeah, the fact we managed to leave the menu. So now I'm definitely really close to it. So now I want to just... I don't want to risk it. I'm just going to go into the menu and I'm going to start staggering forwards. And now I'm going to do it instead. Because it's actually very consistent when you're right next to those loading zones to stagger instead. If you try to do a sort of run timing, you're actually going to transition before you get into the menu. And if you... in most cases, and if you do it too early, you won't have moved at all. So by staggering, you get yourself a bit of extra distance, helps you get into that loading zone to perform the wrong warp more consistently, but it is difficult. You'll often find as well that when practicing it, that if your mashing isn't quite up to speed, that you will often just go into the next screen. I believe that happened in my latest PB, where I actually attempted to stagger, went too far forward, went into the next room, came back, tried to do it again, and then staggered, because I felt I was too close to the loading zone, that I didn't have the space to work with. As when you are really close to this loading zone, let me get really close. A bit closer than that. That's probably about as close as I can get. If Levant starts to try and move backwards when using analog stick, which I want to do, you actually end up moving forwards instead. So yeah, I was actually I was holding back. You can see that Levant sort of turned away there. If I held it down, I probably would have managed to turn around, but you often can't turn around when you get that close to the loading zone unless you're not using analog, which when I'm playing PAL I personally do use. I know it's personal preference, but that's sort of why I investigated how to do this staggering business. So that's all there is to it. So the first technique is very simple. It's pretty much what you do in NTSC already. It's just that you need to be very precise on the timing, as using the Hunter-Zeering doesn't move you forward at all. But I find the staggering method helps a lot with the PAL version, especially when you're right next to that loading zone, and you know you're right next to it. But you do need to have good knowledge of those loading zones, because if you're wrong, you will attempt the Hunter Transit glitch and you won't get it at all. You'll just run up to here, start staggering, and then still be too early. So this would be early. I start moving. I stagger forwards like twice, and it won't be enough anyway because I'm way too far out, and I know I'm way too far out. So you still need to know where the loading zones are pretty precisely. But I find it a little bit easier to do. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope this is useful to you if you ever attempt to do the PAL Hunter Transit glitch. I just wanted to go over it because I know that for a long time, probably just due to the lack of runners, that this glitch was believed by a lot of people to not even be possible in the PAL version. Where really I just think it's that the setup is different and that causes you to need to do other things or to time it differently in order to get it. But it's actually much more consistent than historically believed. And I hope that you guys can put this to use.